get started. So welcome to this webinar. And just as an introduction, I'll just do welcome to country. So we acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection with the land, waters and culture. We pay our respect to the elders past, present and emerging. So this sort of webinar is sort of like an overview of the workshop, which is going to be held at Data Modelling Zone on the 30th of June in the morning. So it's going to be sort of a 3-hour workshop. And so this is like an introductory overview about what we covered in the workshop. So the Data Modelling Zone is really focused on data modelling and data architecture and designing data. So please consider joining if you can. So my name is Andrew Smailes. Some of you met me already. So I'm currently the Dharma branch head, Dharma Canberra branch head. So I'm a principal consultant for Capital BI. I've been involved with Dharma for over 20 odd years. I was national president for a while and things like that. Through sort of Dharma, when the government announced the importance of data skills back in 2015, early 2016, met Steve Homan, and I convinced him he'd given the importance the Australian government placed on data skills that Data Modelling Zone should come to Australia. So that's so I'm sort of the local organiser of Data Modelling Zone. And I also sort of took an interest a few years ago in cognitive technology or natural understanding of unstructured text, given that every agency I go to has and do a strategist for a vast amount of unstructured documents. So Expert AI is one of Europe's leading AI companies. So for this sort of webinar, I'm basically going to go a bit of an overview of data governance, and it really is, I suppose, setting the scene, sort of my point of view of what the theory is about and what we should be focusing on. Then sort of a bit about how we got to this point. There's a bit of history we'll go through, which I think people need to understand if they sort of get in the right spot around data governance and talk to people about data stewardship, and then a bit about what do we cover in the workshop. So data governance, that's covered in the data modelling, the Dharma Data Manager Body of Knowledge. It's the one in the middle. And it's even Dharma defines it as an exercise of authority, control, and share of decision making. But then it also talks about the design and execution of standards and policies. It's about making sure that they're met, that they deliver value, and they're strategic high level across the organisation. And it's to ensure there's effective information management, so it goes a bit beyond sort of data management, and there's continual improvement through the evolution of an information management strategy. And so the DMBOK also says it's not a one-off sort of technical exercise or responsive technology and IT environment alone. It's really a business function. So when we talk about data stewards, a lot of people are coming up with very extensive, I think DMBOK covers it too, very extensive frameworks for data stewardship. So we've got the chief data steward, high-level bodies, you've got the executive stewards, business data stewards, domain data stewards, look after shared data, systems owners and data administrators. So there's a big horizon there. So in the workshop, what we're focusing on is the business data steward. So that is the subject matter experts in data working within business. And so that's the person who has the day-to-day business as usual responsibility around data and making the decisions around data. So if you wait for anybody to the left, so the chief data steward, executive data steward, to make decisions, you're moved from understanding of where the problem is. And you're most likely elevating the decision making to people who probably have no background, no real training in data. So, and if you go to the right side of things with administrators and things like that, they don't really understand how the data impacts their business area. So I think it's important to concentrate on the business data steward. So it's the person who's working in business. So, what is the role of a business data steward? Well, there's, we've got dimensions here. There's about 8 different dimensions So the change managers, they understand the requirements, they develop and manage business outcomes, the SMEs and the data and things like that. So they have an important role in understanding, interpreting and working with the data and how people use it. So at the end of the day, they're the people who are going to sign off it's correct. They're going to the people who say what the access is and things like that. So that's why they're important. There's another part of why data, so yeah, oh, a slide missing, no. So what's the problem at the moment with data stewardship? So I know a lot of government agencies in town, and I've talked to various agencies in Brisbane and Sydney, and you know, it's a challenge, and there's big challenges around it because understanding of enterprise data management is low. You know, what are we trying to do? Why are you talking about an organizational capability when I have problems in my business area? Stovepipe. You know, the whole idea of data governance is very new to a lot of people. There's a corporate culture, there's a focus on data, and there's a lot of education and defining roles and responsibilities, which is always complex in any organization without the support of higher things. And then, you know, how do we know it's going to work, and how do we know it's going to be successful? So another reason to focus on you know, the business data stewards is they're actually the primary users of many of the deliverables from data governance point of view. So from a data asset register, they were focused on improving access to their data. In data specification, well, they're the people that they're going to sign off on the specifications. They're the people who are going to manage the quality. They're going to do controls, engage with IT, and they're going to engage with executives and talk about data problems, or you know, where they are, where they're not, and talk about innovation around data. So it's important to recognise that you know, a data steward is a primary user of the work which data governance areas do in organisations. So what's, you know, why are we doing this? And you know, what are the issues? What's the history behind this? So I've shown this in a lot of presentations, but I'll do it again. So basically, you know, the data is about, you know, 60 years old. So about 60 years ago was when organizations first started to use data. And then there's been a very, you know, within people's career plans, we've seen huge changes happening on a regular sort of basis. So there's, you know, in the 70s was mainframes, and then there was SQL came along in the 80s, data integration in the 90s. In the noughts, you know, Google appeared and social media, and then in the 2000s, there's a lot of, you know, around analytics, customer-driven data, and things like that. And there's been a ever-increasing range of technology over that time. And so here we are in now 2021. We should have another, you know, one for this decade to add it in. But in 2021, we still have people, you know, COBOL jobs running on mainframes, along with, you know, beside them can be an open source database and things like that. Yes, attendees automatically muted for somebody's. But if you put a question in the chat box, I'll let you know. So there's been this growing complexity over the years, and there's been a change. So back in the 60s and 70s, everybody built their first systems. In the 80s, people were doing archaeology. They were working out what their first system was, and then they were redeveloping it. In the 90s, when Bill Inman wrote his book, and Kimball too, that's when BI and data integration really started. So extracting data and putting it into a data warehouse. In the 2000s, that's when the regulation started, regulation around data. And in the 2010s, that was an open data and sharing data, and these sort of ideas came to the fore. Now, over this time, there's been a steady growth in data, belief in technology, you know, and interest in analytics has been continually upwards. But data management itself took a dive. And so I was the treasurer of Diamond Canberra in 2005. So up to 2005, the job of a treasurer was very easy. You just simply set out an invoice to the Director of Data Management at tax, ABS, whatever department. And that invoice was then came back, a check came back in the mail. So each agency had a, you know, Director of Data Governance. They had a Data Governance Easter section. In that section was, up to 20 dozen to 20 odd or more people who were specialists in data quality, data modeling, or data architecture and things like that. So around 2005, that disappeared. And I'm told in banking and other private enterprise, they did it sooner. And it was really around this idea with ERP systems that if you could, implement a system that would solve all your data problems for you. So when we talk about data governance, we have to actually recognize, or data governance or data management, anything about data management really, is this what I call this dark age, that for 10 years, there was nobody coming into data management and a lot of skills were lost. And the net result is, there's people who started in the 80s like me are now retiring. And so a lot of the expertise that was there back then is now retiring and leaving. So the point of saying that is that a lot of what people talk about now with stewardship and things and engagement with business, well, that problem was solved in the 80s and 90s. And people, were working with business, data modeling. I remember, explaining a data modeling, walking through a data model, physical data model of a new child support system to a deputy commissioner of the tax office and about 5 or 6 executives. So back then there was a different world and a different relationship people had with data. And we at the moment, we're really trying to recreate that. So what's on history, around data governance really took off in about 2005. There's a Google app where you can check out the terms and where their popularity and where they come from. And on that app, it starts about 2005 is when data governance came in and data regulation. So but it's separate, okay, for data. So this slide I was going to turn into the positives, but it's got the negatives around data and data projects and things like this. So there's a lot of talk at the moment around people failing and people saying the reason for failure is data literacy, poor data literacy, data skills, not having a good data stewardship network, and all these sort of things. So my point of view, and and sort of the background said to the workshop is that it's all about strategy and the organisations that succeed with data. So a lot of the big data projects and things like that, which people hold up as success, are organisations who are very good at business strategy. So they already have business strategy, and data is integrated as part of that strategy. So one of the challenges we have in talking about data strategy and data governance is that we're largely dealing with working in organisations that don't really have a corporate engineered sort of strategy. We're not a big oil company. We're not BHP and all these things. We've got to invest billions of dollars and get it right. So this is the main sort of thrust, I suppose, of my view of data management, is it's data strategy that's the key to success. And so this is from Peter Aitken's book, Data Strategy and Enterprise Data Executive. So what he points out, so a business data steward is in data operations. There's a data governance role, which applies standards and processes and things like that, and they have oversight over IT projects living business. But it's the data strategy is what they use to actually drive change. So data strategy, if you like, is a contract between the organization and the organizational strategy and the data governance about what are they going to deliver and how they're going to deliver it. So key part of this the strategy sort of framework here is the feedback loop that exists. So there's a two-way loop going on between the operational data stewards and to the data governance people, to the data strategy, to the organizational strategy. And it's this feedback loop, it's a two-way direction saying this is what we want out of data and this is why we're not getting it out of data. It's very important and really should underline the data governance sort of framework. So at the moment, a lot of organizations are coming to data with a very sort of recipe book type approach to data strategy. So they have a lot of slogans around evidence-based policies. They have talk about the standards and components. They're going to put in place data governance, data catalogs, and there's going to they talk about what they don't talk about is business objectives, information needs, scope of enterprise data, and things like that. So Selva Murugesan, who's was from Dharma, Canberra, did an analysis, got hold of 100 odd strategies off the web and analysed them, and virtually all of them are the same. And they were principally I have to say government, organisations, but there's a big sort of push to have a standard sort of strategy and remove. It's more strategies that are more about improving data governance and data things rather than talking about business objectives. So the last bit, almost last bit to talk about strategy is that most people, when they talk about strategy, they want to go to the top right corner. They're talking about you're going to do insights of data and things like that. What we're not recognizing is that if you have no business, data strategy and no business case, you have to improve operational effectiveness first. You can't leap straight into being all powerful with the data and doing analytics and stuff like that. And it's sort of like if you see get the chance to see Telstra's open source analytics platform, you can see that they put a lot into it. They have a big engineering background and things like that. They're very responsive to these sort of things. So, but the key thing for most people is getting this organizational efficiency and effectiveness done, which is part of the data stewardship role. So this is from the DMBOK. This is Sue Guerin's framework for talking about dependencies and functions in data management. And what she's got down the bottom here is that the key part or the key foundation is data governance, which includes metadata, security, data architecture, and reference data. And then from that, you can build up onto those sort of capabilities. So these sort of ideas are what is built into the training course. So now to just cover some of the 8 themes through the workshop. The first thing is it's work out what is the role of the Data Stewards Network. And getting clear around the business objectives, how business is going to work, across business areas, going to work across business areas. How is regulatory compliance going to be achieved? What is it? How is it going to be compliant? How does it apply to an individual data steward? So a data steward, when you're appointing a data steward, how does he know what his job is and how does it relate to? So to do that, you really need to cover the second part, which is data stewardship. They have to understand the landscape. The data steward people would turn to it's somebody who's looking after something or has ownership over something. This sort of the word comes from. So Lord Steward of Scotland or Denmark or something like that. If you're a Lord Steward of Scotland, you want to know how many Scots there are, how many cattle, how many sheep, because all these things, because the king is going to want number sheep and some sort of outputs one day. And so understanding the current landscape is no different. And really, it's a vital thing for a data steward to understand how their landscape holds together. And this actually helps then build up an architecture for common communication between the data stewards. So the third key thing is the goals around data stewardship. So it's the security, privacy, and compliance, and all these sort of things. Now, again, not all goals, not all these dimensions relate to all data stewards. So it's about applying what your role with your data and your business. What are those goals and achievements that have got to be done? So the workshop covers how do you do that? How do you do that, and what are you trying to do out of that? So ultimately, I suppose the thing that people want from data is self-service access and trust. So you've got to bring the goals to the fore and talk about what are the constraints and things like that to stop that. The fourth thing is around data modeling. Now I think this is the hardest thing in Australia to explain to anybody. When I started with data modeling zone here, data modeling is just seen as a physical implementation here in Australia. And you're lucky to find a data modeler who is, in their 60s somewhere doing physical models. It's actually, data modeling is much more important from the business point of view. It's to talking about data. You can't govern something you can't talk about. And so the data modeling has to be covered. We'll do some introduction to data modeling and how to teach it to people. So focusing on data quality is key to a role of a data steward. Now, I've seen people do data quality frameworks and things like that, but we have to make certain that the people are supported and there's the right sort of framework to do that and making it work and getting to people understand what their role is in terms of data quality. So the sixth thing we're to cover is the importance of data stewards and metadata management. Now, the word data steward first appeared in this book in focus. Anyway, it's the data warehouse toolkit by Ralph Kimball. It was from 1998. That's the first time it was mentioned, the word data steward, and that person was responsible for metadata. And this is a key function of a data steward, is to actually support the metadata and to make, you know, certain that it's being collected and accessible and it's kept for history, for lineage, and for sharing and trust and all these sort of things. So we talk about quite a bit about metadata. And so the seventh thing is really about going back to this idea of strategy. And this is from Peter Aitken's book. So it's not so you set a goal for 3 years or whatever, then just put the strategy aside. The strategy is really a process of understanding what the business wants, what the current issues are, and then incrementally removing constraints going forward. You know, why do you do an iterative approach? Because you're delivering value to the business all the time. And who are you delivering value? You're delivering value to the data stewards. So a key part of a data strategy and a data steward network, and that is this ongoing process of developing capabilities to data stewards, because they're the BAU operational people who are going to benefit from the data strategy. So in building an effective network, you have to recognize that the Data Stewards Network is within business. There are stakeholders in the enterprise data management function, and there's stakeholders in IT too. So we have to look at those roles and set the expectations that there will be support and people understand those roles. So there's an external need to actually train and educate people in how the data steward works and how it's going to operate and the skills and things that are required. It's not solely the responsibility of enterprise data management and the data stewards themselves. So in talking about this whole thing about strategy and design and involving business data stewards in design, this is, we've organised a webinar with this guy, Harkin Edmondson. So Harkin Edmondson wrote the editor for the data management body of knowledge architecture chapter, and he wrote the book Data Enterprise Architect Made Simple. So in this book, Data Diplomacy, he talks about design should be the centre of data activity, and that governance, formal governance processes don't work. Now, I saw Harkin speak. He was at the keynote at the Data Modeling Zone conference in Germany in 2009, which I went to. And after the presentation, I talked to as many people I could about this idea about, where does design fit into your organisation, and who does the data modelling, and do the executive understand data models? And the overall response was, well, of course the executive understand data models. How do you get projects funded if they don't understand data models? They can't talk about data. Where are you from again? So I'm very fortunate I got Harkin to do it. So this is a webinar which I ask people who are going to come to the workshop to view beforehand, because I think this actually sets the context, which is missing from a lot of conversation around data stewardship and data governance in Australia at the moment, is this idea that it's actually about design. It's not actually about coercing and getting people and escalating to senior executives who don't know what you're talking about. So I highly recommend that webinar, and suggest if you want to come to the workshop that you see it too. So the last slide before with questions. This is about the Data Modeling Zone conference. It's in Melbourne and virtual. It's had a great price reduction, so $567 for Dharma members, and it's to my mind, there's about 3 weeks ago there was the Data Government Summit in Canberra, and I was looking after the Dharma booth at it, and I had conversations with about 6 or 7 people around data skills, and I would say, we really need more data architects, and they say, no, you're wrong. We need more people who can talk to business. Well, whichever way you look at it, it's better communication around data. would be a good idea. So that's what the data modeling zone is about, and you know, trying to get people to understand and how to communicate effectively around data. So that's all I have at the moment. So we have about 5 minutes for questions or longer, if people like. If you actually want to ask a question, put something in the QA and I'll put your hand up and I'll try and unmute you if I can. Are there anybody got any questions? So Jon Gray and I will be running this the workshop, and then John's also running a workshop in the afternoon around data management tools and how to choose data management tools. There was 2 other workshops. One is Steve Hoagman, who's teaching data modeling virtually from New York. We have Asif Gill talking about data architecture, and Lloyd Robinson is going to be doing a CDMP exam cram boot camp for people who want to do CDMP. Okay. So is anybody, are there any questions? If not, please feel free to email me afterwards, either at Catapult BI. So Andrew Smailes at catapultbi.com with an underscore, or you can also do Canberra branchhead at dharma.org.au or via LinkedIn. Anyway, since we haven't had any more questions, thanks for attending. So the session will be recorded and published on the Dharma site. Okay. Okay, thanks all.